Anthony, that is so cool. I have not thought about battle maps that way and space that way.
Yeah, I did not expect this conversation to go in this direction.
I love it.
And yet here we are.
Recorded live from the secret Coliseum beneath the Cartographer's Guildhall, it's the Roll for Joycast, where we quest in order to play our way to a world of holy wholeness.
I'm your host, Anthony, using pronouns like he, him, and serving as your Battlemap Boss.
And I'm your host, Rory, using pronouns like he, him, and serving as your Dungeon Master Pastor.
And I'm your host, Alex, using pronouns like they, them, and serving as your roleplay paladin.
Today is episode 7, where we will explore the ups, downs, hexes, and squares of battle maps.
But first, let's roll initiative and meet the players at the table. All right, folks.
My big chonker here.
Get your dice. I'm going to go with a virtual die this time because I am locked in to my device, but
I got an 8.
I'm going to shake it around.
I got an 18.
I got natural 20!
Woo! Yay! Crit.
Okay. So what was your favorite moment in playing or DMing, Alex?
Oh my gosh.
Wait, I got the highest. You got to ask me.
Oh, I got to ask you.
I got a natural
My
20.
Bad. Okay. Yeah, you are correct, Rory. I'm sorry. My bad. What was your favorite?
Let's just fight.
What was your favorite encounter moment while playing or DMing?
My favorite encounter moment. I have so many that were pretty fun. I think there is a joy that I have when it feels like everybody is like the encounter is constantly shifting, like when you're having a fight and it doesn't just like everybody takes their positions and then you're locked in for the remainder of the encounter, but when situations are changing and you're moving around. Yeah, I'm thinking about, I had one I ran at a convention here in the Twin Cities years ago. But the encounter still sticks out in my mind because of the way that the encounter was set up. They were in limbo, in the plane of limbo, kind of, which is this chaotic, crazy plane. And they had found, I believe, a ship. From what I remember, there was this like pirate ship in limbo that they kind of crept in, and then an encounter triggers. You're trying to get something out of there, and inevitably, like somebody spots you, and you have to fight your way out. But the way that this map was set up was there was 4 sides to the map, and it was like there was the floor. And there was the wall, there was a ceiling, and then there's the other wall. And every round you rolled and the thing would shift because the whole ship was like suspended in limbo. And so you never knew like which way you were going to be flung.
It's very Zelda. It's very...
I love that.
The new...
It was so cool, and there was like characters falling and like trying to grab onto the doorways and the railings, and it was just like constantly shifting up every single round. And
have you played Breath of the Wild, Rory?
Have I played Breath of the
Wild? There's the giant guardians that like rotate in the sky, and all of a sudden you have no idea where you are in the midst of it.
I think it's been a while, but
that's crazy.
Yeah. But yeah, sort of that sort of fun.
That's so cool, Rory.
Alex, how about you? What was your favorite encounter moment while playing or DMing?
Like you, I mean, I would say that there are so many. It's really hard to pick. Rory, you just put a blog post up the other day about one of my absolute favorite ones that we had talked about the grandma and the power word kill. That was amazing. But I think a lot of the time, some of my favorite moments at the table are when you have built up community and story over time, and then you get to bring back in people and elements that are like oh my gosh, like an inside joke kind of thing, or inside person memory. And I'm talking about really well-established ones, not one like, oh yeah, it's that guy you saw at the bar, but like a big character moment. And one of the stories I am thinking about is I got to play a first game that I run was kind of a sandbox game with Star Wars 5e with a bunch of my friends that I made during COVID who all love Star Wars, who work professionally as Star Wars artists. So we were playing our way through a game, and so we have all of our our regular characters, but we're painting the world around us everywhere we go. And then every once in a while, we would have a cameo of one of everybody's just favorite characters. We love Star Wars Rebels, so we'd have like a cameo from Rebels of somebody, and everybody would be like, "Oh my gosh!" and get to interact with your favorite character, and then they'd be gone again. So it was such a fun moment of going in and out of a story that's so much bigger than you, and then right back into your really personal story. And I don't usually like connect with the broader fandom spaces when I'm playing those things, but having a moment of recognition like that is just so much fun.
That sounds super fun.
It was very fun. I'll share another one with you guys. One of my favorite moments that wasn't necessarily an encounter like a fight, but it was like a climax of a story that was so beautiful. Like, I don't know if you've ever played a game when everything ties up exactly the best way it could have. Like all the things come back together, and it's other people helping you tell the story. Like you couldn't have done it. You might have had hopes for how it would go, but like everybody brings it exactly the way you hoped for. So spoilers for anyone who is playing Spelljammer with the Light of Xerxes story. Skip ahead
Okay.
like just a couple minutes if you're playing that. But at the end of that story, there is a noble sacrifice that a character needs to choose to make. And it could be some of the characters at your table, or there's also some NPCs that people have grown really close to who can make this noble sacrifice to save the galaxy, but they will die. And we had begun the whole story with my spouse, Nash. They had designed a kobold barbarian. And this kobold barbarian was actually an astral dragon who had been cursed and forced into a kobold body and lost memories. And so he would always say things like, "I'm a real dragon." Everybody would be like, "Yeah, okay, okay." But we didn't really know about the backstory or hear all those things. And at the very end of the story, he makes this noble sacrifice for other people instead of himself, which is this huge character arc of growth. And the curse is lifted, and he transforms into the astral dragon, and the astral dragon like flies into the star and the sun and makes this heroic noble
Oh
self-sacrifice
wow.
and dies and saves the galaxy. And it
That
was
is awesome.
the coolest thing because it was like all of the narrative pieces for that character came full circle in the coolest way, and everybody at the table was just like
Mhm.
the way we all told it together and set it up, we all knew. We were like, "No, don't do it. He has to." It was, yeah, so those moments when you get to a climax of a story and you don't
Mhm.
know if it's ever going to turn out in a way that you hope for, but man, it turned out good. And
Mhm.
we had the chance. Whenever a character dies, I always give people the chance and say, "Do we want to rewind this? Do we want to take two? Like, is it okay if your character dies?" And Nash was like, "Yep, this is the fullness of his story. That's exactly what was needed." So it was just such a cool thing to all play together.
That's cool.
That
Yeah.
is awesome.
How about you, Anthony?
Mine is probably so last year I had written a blog post for you about why I was excited for this past year's retreat. And one of the things that I mentioned there is this, dang it, Valsis. I was playing this Eladrin ranger named Valsis, and I played him kind of with a little bit of my own ADHD in there. He's going to touch, if there's a button, he's going to press the button. And it was kind of funny because I'm sitting there, Ben is our DM, and he's describing the scene on top of a tower where there's a bunch of dead, I guess, cultists, and there's this big, bright, shining gem in the middle, and they're all in intervals around it. And I'm looking at this, and they're like, "Well, let's just leave this." I said, "But there's this gem," and they're like, "Yeah, don't touch it." I'm not going to touch the gem. They're like, "Okay," and I was look at the body, and I just kind of nudge the body. Next thing you know, there's a mind flayer coming out at Paul's face.
Oh no.
Thankfully, we killed the mind flayer. And after that, every time I was going to go press the button, they're like, "You get one button to press today, Valsis. One." I was like, okay, because that was a thing. So yeah, dang it, Valsis. After every time Valsis would do something, that would trigger everything. So yeah.
You
Nice.
never knew what encounter you had in store when you were playing Velsis.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It was absolutely amazing. I loved it. I
That's
loved it.
fun. It's fun to be like the element of chaos at the table, isn't it?
Yes.
A little bit, yeah.
I haven't been that character quite yet. Well, actually, my in-person games in Sioux Falls, I'm that character, but any of the ones I've played with Holy Rollers, I've never been that character. So
Oh,
I'm gonna have to try harder.
yeah.
So as we continue our adventure this evening, let's check our sending stones because some of you have already been casting messages our way. If you want your voice at this table, you can reach us at Joycast at roll4 joy.org or hit us up on social media. Now let's see what's come through the ether. All right, from John via Facebook. John says, "Howdy. I want to thank you for your positive message and your time. Both are important. I have somewhat recently graduated from the Boulder Crest Foundation's Warrior Path program. We have completed our 90-day program, and I have continued to run meetings on a bi-weekly basis. I have a heart to help others, especially the marginalized and disenfranchised groups out there that suffer. TTRPGs have been shown through evidence-based findings to be helpful for individuals with trauma in their past and present. I have wanted to use D&D to some capacity with therapy for a long time. My heart, intent, and purpose is to help others. This is especially the case for those who are unjustly treated and fellow trauma survivors. As such, I would love any help or advice you're willing to share in order to assist and even point me in the right direction for helping others through the use of TTRPGs. Much appreciated, and thank you, John."
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it's funny because I actually recently talked to somebody who did this. There's actually a therapist out there that use this modality where they have a DM facilitator who augments their therapy. So the therapist will, and of course, as a DM, you have to go through this specialized training and certification, and the therapist goes through their own certification for this. But they say, okay, say person A is working on, they're having anger issues, and they're trying to, you see how they do with those. So you present these opportunities in game to have them engage in these things that would make them angry, or to address some other issue, and to see how they do. Now, you don't judge one way or another, and you just let things play out as they play out, and you come back, hey, this is how they did with it. This is how they reacted to it. And I cannot remember the website to save my life. I'll find it. I'll think of it, and I'm sure I'll think of it before the end of our discussion here. But it's a really interesting modality that I've heard of. A DM paired with a therapist who help with the healing process through a myriad of different issues, from depression, anxiety, to trauma, to all these other things. And it is a beautiful thing to hear about and hear, because I got a chance to talk to one of the DMs.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and he said, no, it's so rewarding to watch these people heal using something that I absolutely love.
Yeah. And I hadn't heard of that before. I had heard of therapists using D&D as DMs, but not of them pairing up with a DM who's not a therapist, who just kind of brings somebody else in to add to their skills. I have heard of a couple different programs that will train therapists or therapeutic users of games. And maybe these are some of the ones you were trying to think of, Andy. I know there's Game to Grow is
Mhm.
There's also Geek Therapeutics does a
That's what I was thinking of.
certification program.
Yes,
And
Geek Therapeutics.
yeah,
Yeah.
Geek Therapeutics does one that I know people that have gone through, and somebody that is one of the trainers there. And then the Bodana group is another one that does a multi-week kind of training course for people to kind of be trained in using this. I think it's important in all of these that there is some training involved, that nobody's just like saying, I'm gonna just start doing this work with the people at my table. And your players' backstories should not be fodder for what you put into your game unless you have their consent and you've had a conversation about it. But especially when those backstories are filled with trauma.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The specific word that you hit the nail on the head, that is such a big one to me, is consent. Because a lot of us who have been through different kinds of trauma might not have had the option to choose how to act during that, because it was survival mode. And so D&D can sometimes trigger flight, fight, freeze, and you can use it as that way too if you know you're going into it. But I think that consent is the key of knowing sort of what you're up for today. And a great way to do that is with your session zero. When you get together with your players and you set the tone of being like, what's chill? what subjects are absolute no's, to talk about the tools that we use, the safety tools like fast forward and rewind and pause. I can't remember the name of the maker right now, but I'm sure we'll put the link to go with it for those RPG safety tools. Giving players almost like a remote so that they can use their voice and consent when they're playing and say like, oh, no thanks, I gotta step that one back. Not just because you don't want to roll in that one, but maybe your character made a decision you want to back up. But one of the hats I wear is I'm a yoga instructor and I do trauma informed yoga. And it's really applying a lot of these same tools and skills because it is really important that you do that training. And it really does kind of pivot around back to how do you reinforce safety and how do you offer people choices that let them feel safe? And if someone has something to say about how they'd like to feel safe, how do you honor and respect that? And when you have a group dynamic, usually balancing some of that tension a lot of the time goes to whoever is most vulnerable. So I appreciate, I mean, John, you mentioned, John, you were talking about folks who are marginalized and disenfranchised and going through trauma. And so having people who are trauma informed and aware of interpersonal power dynamics at the table, it can be so healing. Like
Mhm.
when I do games at the Prism Center, which is a place for our local LGBTQ plus 2IA kiddos in our community, there'll be all these sweet kids here being really vulnerable, trying D&D. Every once in a while, we have someone just come in, like a friend or somebody who doesn't match the vibe. It is such a thing to when somebody is spewing garbage to just be like, hey, she was talking. Like sometimes that's part of how that works. And hopefully it's not very often that you have to do something like that. Hopefully, you know the vibe of the players before you get too far into a game. But offensive and defensive, I think there's so many ways to do that with D&D,
Yeah. But
formally and
yeah,
informally.
yeah. Well, thank you for the question, John. And I think there is power in this game. Power for healing, power in just the act of role playing and creating safe spaces with people that you can trust to kind of get into what's going on. And with the proper training and consent and creating those sorts of things around the
Mhm.
table, it can be a really powerful tool for good. So, yeah, I hope you stick with it. And thanks for the question.
Well, now it's time to get to the heart of today's quest. Every episode we take on a new main topic, and today it's this: how does physical terrain enhance game and how can I do it? Why terrain matters beyond looking cool.
Yeah, Battlemap Boss. What do we
Yeah.
need to know?
Teach us, Battlemap Boss.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about why terrain creates tactical depth. You guys know that, at least the two of you know, that I'm really big in physical terrain. I like doing it. It's fun. But what makes it fun? Well, one of the things that I have found is that it transforms combat from I move and attack to a dynamic problem solving. You got elevation, choke points, bridges, ruins, cover, and hazards that force players that have to think creatively. And suddenly you have archers that are seeking high ground, rogues using shadows and obstacles, spellcasters manipulating bottlenecks, fighters protect vulnerable allies in narrow corridors. The battlefield itself becomes part of the encounter instead of just a backdrop, right? And that's a huge thing. It's one thing to be able to do theater of mind and saying, "Oh yeah, you're on this rickety bridge." It's another thing to see that rickety bridge drawn out. In fact, one of my favorite stories in D&D history, this is part of D&D history, is there was a D&D tournament that was going on, and back when Gary Gygax was alive, and he told this great story where he was watching this table. The party had triggered an encounter with a host of orcs that they just could not handle through bad rolls and they weren't able to handle it, and they were running away. And they get to a bottleneck, and he said he has never been so impressed about what D&D is about until the player who was playing a paladin. He said she looks up at the rest of the players and says, "Everybody run. I'll give you as much time as I can." She said, "I draw my sword and turn," and she held the door for something like 20 rounds by herself, and he said that was just such a cool moment.
I
And
think it's a
that's one of
cool
those things.
moment just that encounter lasted 20 rounds.
Exactly.
Like,
That was my
what
thing,
encounter lasts 20 rounds anymore?
right?
That's the most paladin thing I can think of, and I love it so much.
Right?
Anthony,
Good.
when we have had you, so for anybody who hasn't had the pleasure of playing a game with you as a DM or as a player, at our Holy Rollers retreats, Anthony brought huge 3D printed maps of all of our like main combat, the peak of our combat situations for each of the tables that we ran. When they were so detailed, like mine was like this beast in a dining hall, and just looking at the visual
Wait, I'm gonna go
gave
get
me
mine.
ideas. Awesome. Roy's gonna grab his. So like just looking at the space gave me ideas about how the combat and the role play was going to go that I didn't have before I saw it. So I'm definitely a person that needs a map to play D&D. Like if it's all theater of the mind, that's really hard for me to picture what combat looks like. I
Yeah.
need to know how far away I am from an enemy. I need to know what I can investigate. Like I just need to see something. And it can be fairly simple. But then we have Anthony bring these incredible battlescapes, and mine was like this mansion, and there was a big feast, and there were all these places that characters could be and guards could be, and there were so many different levels.
I had a lot of battle map envy over your set piece
What?
encounter. That was the coolest thing.
It is so cool, and I love having those. And I think there's just this moment of awe in playing pretend AWE awe when you're all sitting at the table, and then you go battle map reveal, and everybody goes, "Oh my gosh, it's real!" It just brings it tactile. It makes it incarnate.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. So Anthony, the head has fallen off of my dragon train, but we had a train encounter, and you had created for me a number of pieces of this like orc train car that traversed all throughout the region, and that was another contender for an awesome like encounter at the table when there were characters on the train car and they were locked in, but they were getting attacked from the outside, and then they were climbing on top of the train car, and people were riding alongside it, and things were going to derail, and the whole thing shook. It was just amazing to then have that prop of the physical thing at the table, which, you can't always do. Not everybody has access to an awesome, friend with a 3D printer.
a Battlemap Boss.
And a Battlemap Boss.
Yeah.
But beyond, so if you're going to make terrain, Anthony, what sorts of things do you feel like are important to bring to the table? Like if you have limited resources and maybe you can't make, like you're not, like obviously we would all love to have everything super cool, fully realize what our imagination is out on the table. Like that's super cool. That's also not super realistic for most games, especially if you're running a regular game and you're just kind of getting together for a night. Maybe you don't even know where people are going to end up. But what might be some pieces that you would have that are important to have, like physical terrain or representations of, or at least makeshift ones?
Sure. First off, I want to let everybody know there's nothing bad about having a literal battle map and a pen, whether it's a vis-a-vis or a dry erase. There's nothing wrong with that. I use it on the regular, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's amazing. In fact, the battle mat I use is one I actually got the idea from Alex's. I actually got the same product that Rory had with this silicone one, and I found the name brand and went and bought my own. It's amazing. I love it.
Those are the best battle maps. This is not we don't get sponsors. Who sponsors the podcast anymore? But that would be great, So, but what is the name? Is it Aragon Games? I feel like
Aragon Games, yeah.
Aragon Games makes the coolest battle map because you can draw on it with wet erase, dry erase. You can leave it on there for a year and it'll still come off, and it just like flops out flat, and you can just like bunch it up, and you don't have to worry about the Chessex like rolly edges. I love it. I love that you have one now too, Anthony. Welcome to the club.
Yes, I literally folded up into this tiny square and put it in my D&D bag thing, and it just gets shoved in there.
Oh yeah, that is what I have. ERGON. Aragon Games. Yep, I got that.
It's great. Well, to get to your question, Rory, it's all about vision, right? I have a friend that hardly uses 3D print stuff. In fact, he hadn't even set up his 3D printer when I had met him. He was a fan of using everyday objects and putting them together to make something using everyday objects and then painting it all to look like something else. Like he made an airship that he had found this thing that he carved, like kind of used a X-Acto knife to carve out into the shape of a boat. And he found, he used a 2-liter bottle of soda, a 2-liter soda bottle, and that was the blimp. And he painted this whole thing up. He used like twine and these other things to make the rigging and all this stuff. And he showed it to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And he's not pointing out all these bits and pieces that either he got from other games, or that he did this whole kit bashing thing, or things that he had found everyday objects and then repurposed them and then painted them. But it can be even simpler than that. You can have aquarium plants that you can get for forests, right? You can get coffee stirrers for bridges. Pill bottles can become towers. Packaging foam can become rocky cliffs. Kit bashing and random objects together can create really unique locations that feel unlike anything that you can buy straight from a store or 3D print. It's one of the easiest and cheapest ways to fill a table with immersive scenery, which is another reason to have terrain. I think, and you guys kind of mentioned it, and I agree, it really enhances immersion, right? Because it starts going, can I leap across that gap? Can I flip that table for cover? Can we barricade this doorway? So it is this really cool thing that gets people into the headspace of, this is where we are, and this is how we can use not just our abilities, but we can use the terrain to our advantage.
I have to show you guys a picture. You talking about this reminded me of, there's a store here in the Twin Cities called Axeman, where you go in and it's just like surplus junk. I don't even know where they get half of it, but it's like little like odd shaped pieces of plastic or glass.
I thought we were going to be talking about like Todd the Axeman with Surly, since we were talking about the cities, but
oh no. No, it is. I went and just walking through there, you can make whatever. So we made this tower out of random stuff that I found. I just found these like foam, those little like foam tubes, like big pool noodles, but they were just little chunks of them. So I bought a bunch and used those as pillars, and then bought these plates of glass, and we had in my home game, they were going through this tower and there was a big dragon fight at the top, and so each level of the tower, I'd add a new like set of pillars and plate of glass, and then a new set of pillars and plate of glass, and a new set of pillars and plate of glass, until they were up at the top, and it was just the coolest. Zoomed right in on the mini pretzel snacks.
Sponsored by Mini Pretzels.
Right.
Okay.
But it is one of the coolest things, and then you get up there.
That is super cool, because you
To
don't
the
know
thing.
like, what's
Awesome.
coming.
And so you didn't know what was coming, and you could kind of build it out the whole way. But I had to show you that picture. I had forgotten about that entirely. But you can find great stuff, like going thrifting for D&D terrain. That's a whole scene.
Oh yeah. And it gets even better because there's another way, because there's 3D printing, which is awesome. I'm a 3D printer maker. I love it. But you can also do this stuff called foam craft, where you can they have this specific kind of foam that you use a hot knife with to kind of shape everything, or you can use a hobby knife. And let's see if I can pull up these pictures.
We understand this is an audio medium.
Oh, this is audio medium.
We're sharing pictures. You can get video. There is video on YouTube if you go and find our Roll for Joy YouTube channel.
Yeah.
You're going to have to go and see some of the stuff. So I do want to see your pictures, Anthony.
Absolutely. There.
Look at that.
I found it. But yeah, this right here, this is just, somebody made that with foam. That's all just foam.
That's cool.
You have the piece that you want for something, whether it be a door or something like that, and you just use your hobby knife to kind of carve out little bits and pieces, and you can paint it, and there's all sorts of different paints out there you can use for it. Some people like to use like little LED lights, to insert those in there, and those are really actually pretty cheap, pretty affordable to do that kind of stuff. And using like things like what's the word I'm looking for? Like model train terrain. That's really good. You can use, a board with, model train grass all over it or stuff like that. That's also a good way to make terrain.
One of the things that I was just thinking about, and like what is the excitement about getting into this like tactile, realistic, close up 3D kind of battle map board and that immersion that you go through as characters when you're all like, okay, we're actually here and we're in the story and I can see it and there's new things I can move and new things I can touch. Because of the role that we all do as clergy, I just made the jump and connected that to worship because I was thinking
Mhm.
specifically about like modern and contemporary worship. You were talking about lights, and I was like, I for a very long time grew up real traditional styles where I was like, no bands, no lights, get that out of there. That's
Hmm.
not real. And then, well, working with one of our new modern worship guys and trying to see this as inclusive,
Hmm.
immersive worship that reminds you that
Yeah.
you're there. You're in the space, like breathing because your body is here, experiencing sound because we're singing together. All the intentionality about a space. It's not a battle map,
Mhm.
but it is about the immersion and the community experience together. And you can
Mhm.
be, when you are really intentional about some of those things, it can be really beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that connection because it's true. You can play and have an encounter, and it's totally theater of the mind. You don't lay anything out on the table. You hold it all in your head, and maybe everybody imagines it a little bit differently, and that's fine. And you can still be fully immersed in that sort of a situation as well. Just like you can go to a Quaker meeting and you can have no liturgy, no music. It is just what comes up in the quiet of being together. And then there are you've got the lights and you've got the music and you've got the battle terrain and you've got the minis and everything's beautiful. And that's like the full sensory experience, which you can have either like super modern, like they do at my church sometimes right now with fog machines and light shows and screens all over and all of that, or like the very traditional worship, high church worship that I went to for Easter this year, where they had
Incense and
incense swinging, and
asperges.
it was its own sort of fog machine.
Yeah.
I realized it's
Lights,
like we've been using fog machines in church a lot longer than I realized.
ancient fog machine. Yeah, that's amazing.
Oh, yeah. And that's one of the other things that I like about terrain that I think also that pairs well with worship is it helps pacing and focus.
Say
Pacing and
more.
focus.
Oh, that
Say
is
more
so
about that.
cool. Tell us more. Tell us more.
You know, in D&D terrain or RPG terrain, it communicates really important information. Where danger is located, what areas matter, what paths are available, what objects can be interacted with. It reduces a lot of confusion, speeds up combat decisions. It's a strong centerpiece, like a ritual altar, a collapsing bridge, or a towering statue, stuff like that. Like if anybody has out there played it, the Tomb of Annihilation has a really cool final boss battle scene where it's this triangular chamber, and in the middle you've got the big thing, the soulmonger, and you've got
Soulmonger,
this
yeah.
big monster in there, and you've got a Serac teleporting around, and you've got the soulmonger there and everything, and and there's 200 feet below there's this pool of lava, and so when I went to one of my games, I had built the terrain, I had it all made, I had it all painted, and I had everything. I said, all right, everybody needs to leave the room. Why? Just leave the room, I promise. And I put this big piece of cardboard out on it. And I said, all right, everybody come back downstairs. They're like, okay. And they came back down. I said, are you guys ready? Yeah. So I pulled out their minis. I said, I need you to hold these. All right, here you go. And for the next 10 minutes, all that I heard was, I've got to take pictures of this. This is so awesome. I was like, well, put your minis down. It'll
Mhm.
look a lot cooler. But it really helps with pacing and focus because they can see, it's a physical representation of this is here, And I think with worship, it's very similar. With music, it helps depending, even just the tempo of the music can help with pacing in a service.
Mhm.
Depending on how you do, if you do lights or how you do lights, what instruments you use for music, what style of sermon you're preaching, what topic you're preaching. All these things come together in different ways to shape the focus of things, And I think that goes a lot with how we talk about faith as well. What is supposed to be at the center of it? We as Christians put Jesus at the center, right? And he needs to be the focus. And we look at our worship services as Christians and we go, where is he in this? And it just in general, as monotheists, we look at, is God the center of this? Where is God in this? Where is God in the middle of this, and how do we show He's here? And with all the things that we do, it shows us this intentionality, right, for making Him the center of worship.
Anthony, that is so cool. I have not thought about battle maps that way and space that way. And it's just like this really cool intersection that I don't think you would think of if you were doing multiple of these vocations at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I did not expect this conversation to go in this direction.
I love it.
And yet here we are, and I love that too. So thanks for sharing that and for sharing your passion for battle maps with us
Yeah.
here for a bit. Well, any other last final tips or things you wanted to make sure we got out there when it comes to the physical terrain on your table?
Yeah. There's a million YouTube videos about how to do it, how to DIY it. I highly recommend checking those out. There is one called tabletop sorcery, I think is what it's called, where it's a guy who does nothing but build terrain, and he uses a lot of the foam craft and DIY stuff. He's a really good resource for that. But there's others out there. And if you have the time, money, and inclination to get a 3D printer, the type of file they use are called STLs or MPF files. There are websites with hundreds, I mean hundreds of various kinds of terrain out there that you can print. In fact, everything I used for Holy Rollers was stuff I had found online that came out that just perfect parts, and got to be able to make those live.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are all different valid ways. And of course, again, as I said it before, there is nothing wrong with a plain battle mat, and even just little glass tokens or even coins to represent monsters and adventurers. So it doesn't matter how you do it. It's all valid. It's all good ways to do it.
Cool. Yeah, and check out your local libraries. I know I was surprised to find out that my local library has a 3D printer that anybody with a library card can just go in and use for free.
For
and
free?
For free.
Mm-hmm.
You
So
don't have
check
to
that
pay
out.
for any of the materials?
You don't have to pay for nothing. Isn't that cool?
You get so much print a month, but yeah, a lot of
Libraries are
times
crazy.
Libraries are
They'll just give you stuff for free. Read a book, make a thing, do it all for free.
love libraries. That's super cool. I was going to ask Anthony before we move on, do you have any advice as far as like printing out maps? Like I subscribe to a couple different Patreon users where they have some really beautiful battle maps. And I always am trying to think about where do I print these off to get the best resolution where I can put them underneath. I've got one of those big old maps where it's got like a map on a flat bottom and then a grid on top, and you can put a printed off image on top. So far, I've done like Walgreens. It's not super cheap, but I was just interested if you had any recommendations for printing like a poster size map for a table. If you've done that before. Either
I
of you.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have. And I like getting ones that I can reuse. So it's a little pricier, like you said, but going to your local printing shop is always good. There's various kinds, even just something like Office Depot, things like that. You can do that. It does cost a little bit, not quite as much as say 3D printed terrain or something like that. But yeah, it is a kind of an investment. It's great if you can have something that you're going to reuse, like a location that they're going to keep coming back to or whatever. And it is worth it. You just got to make sure you tell them that this needs to be printed off. So all the squares are 1-inch squares. And oftentimes they can do that and say it needs to be this, whatever size, that these are all 1-inch squares. So that is my recommendation if you're going to print out some of those, because there are some absolutely gorgeous battle mats out there, printed ones that you can use.
I know one of the things that the Baldman Games group does is they print off a lot of their maps that they use at conventions as blueprints. You can go and get them printed as blueprints, and that's actually much cheaper. So there is a look into that.
Battle map as a blueprint, huh?
As like an architectural blueprint.
And where do you do that?
At a I don't know, store.
That's cool. I have to look at that.
I was trying to like do Google Kung Fu over here and find it.
Well, if you find
real quick, and I couldn't do it immediatly. That's all. Google it.
Ask Dr. Google.
Maybe you'll have better luck than me in 3 seconds. But yeah, you can print off architectural blueprints for cheaper than you can print off like actual like posters,
and then do you like color them in or what?
They print them on color. So
cool.
I don't know. If I find the tips, I'll write a blog about it or something. Promises. Well,
That is cool. That's cool.
yeah. Yeah. And it's like at Kinko's, or I don't know. Is there any Kinko's anymore? Staples, Office Max,
We have a Staples.
someplace like that. Well, anyway, let's before we head out, last but never least, every world does need its makers. And so we have a segment called Game Design Theopoetics, where we play creator for a moment and add something new to the canon. This month's creator is Alex. Alex, what do you want to share from your design table?
Okay, well, I am playing through the collected story Horde of the Dragon Queen, which has some of the Red Dragon Queen different episodes, Tyranny of Dragons, putting them all together. And one of the startup episodes that we had, I don't know if you can hear my kitty meowing. She wants to join D. One of the places that we added to the town of Green Nest, if any of you have played this before, was a specific temple. I wanted to give it some more flavor and help to tell the story. And so we made it the temple for a god who was a god of dragons and paladins, which was part of the pantheon in Faerun. Torm was part of it. And one of the servants of that temple, who was no longer there for story reasons, was a golden dragon named Chivaltrace. And his name kind of conveys some of what he represents. But as the dragon god of the paladins, chivalry, honor, defense, loyalty, some of those kinds of things. And so after my players rescued all the characters and their lead paladin from the temple and got them back to the keep, they wanted to give them a special reward. And it's so fun to give your characters a special reward, whether it is 3D or whether it is just theater of the mind. So I made something 3D for this time for the boon of Chivaltrace. It's saltwater, mica powder, there's colored dye in it. I have a D20 in here, and it's a little glass vial where the top's sealed with some wax and some hot glue and a little twine around it. And basically, it's a figure 8 ball. You shake it up, you turn it upside down, and it rolls a D20. So I gave each character one of these, and I said, these are the boons of Chivaltrace, Golden Dragon's Blood. And the rule is once per episode, or once per session when you're here, a player can, on a reaction, force the DM to re-roll any D20 attack. So it's a very paladin-oriented, like it's a defensive, protective kind of thing. And so perhaps maybe you're fighting a baddie and they crit and you're like, no, they don't, using the boon of Chivaltrace. And so there's this moment of player storytelling. There's this moment of player bonding. It's really, we're talking about like pointing focus towards certain elements of your game and your story. And so it's focusing on like how great it is to protect and defend your loved ones and get everybody to root together on that. It's so fun to equip people with tools to totally put you in your place. So I love to see characters use these things creatively. And I thought a fun way to design a spell or an item that could be used and have a tactile thing to go along with it as a physical reminder.
That's very cool.
I thought of this was because Rory brings the Bless dice to Holy Rollers, which is a D4
Yes.
and has the Holy Rollers logo on it. And keep some of those from the different times, and I will give them to players at my table when I have a paladin or a cleric who blesses them and say, here is your bless, so that you can physically remember to roll that. So those are 2 of my suggestions to go with for today.
Cool. You'll have to send me a picture, take a picture of that thing, and I'll post it up on our
Absolutely.
Instagram and share that along with this blessing. And that's so cool. I love that it not only provides an interesting little mechanical thing for the players to do that feels really good to use. It feels really great to just, take a critical hit away from your DM as a player. You're like, oh, I don't want that. Nope, I'll take that right away from you. And it's cool that you have put so much lore into it that ties it to your world and the campaign and this NPC. And I think when you're creating an item for your game, that your items are like, they can be little vehicles of lore. You can put so much of the story that you're trying to tell into that item that then shares like that in a way that the players find important and memorable.
Just like a battle map.
Just like a battle map. There you go.
Well, fantastic. I think that is it for episode number 7 for the Roll for Joycast. Join us next month when we pay a visit to the Sage of Lore and hear about running a spiritually applied actual play podcast. Until then, give us a rating, leave us a review, reach out to us at roll4joy.org, where you can find links for all of our socials and hopefully pictures of the things that we talk about and describe, which
That's
you
right.
can see in person.
Now remember, folks, journey together.
Find the fun.
And hold on to hope. See you next time.
Bye everyone.